we all said, they took us out because of the danger and the threats and the, But I said, we're going back. I wasn't the only one. The other leaders did too. We are going back. Well, you could call everybody to order in an undisclosed other locations. No, we're going back to the capital of the United States. We're going to be seen in the world as proceeding in the capital of the United States. What was really sad, though, about it is that even after all of the violence and crudeness and disrespect and all that, a majority of the Republicans in the House voted against the results of the Electoral College. That was, in my view, shameful. Now, I didn't come here to be political. We're just talking history here. This is civics. But they voted against the results of the Electoral College. It's unthinkable, but not undoable on their part. So when you ask the impact, was the impact continues. They're going to come Saturday again. They have their plans to come. Everybody will be ready, more ready for them. I'm so proud of our Capitol Police and other law enforcement who saved our lives. I mean, it was all that close, who saved our lives. But I'm the speaker. I have threats all the time. So I'm not afraid for myself. But I was afraid for my other members and for the staff and for the workers in the Capitol. They were traumatized by this assault on the Capitol of the United States, a temple of democracy for the world. But not only that, an assault on our Constitution on the day that the Constitution called for the certification of a new president. So it isn't over yet. Some people think that some of these voter suppression laws that are going on around the country are a part of this whole effort as well. And that's why we're working in Congress to pass legislation to negate some of those voting suppression and nullification of, they have something that says, we'll have 3 people decide what the vote was. No, that's not right. The people will decide what the vote will be. But I just, again, with all the emotion and all the, how could they do this, the Capitol? I'm not a big person wedded to how they trash my office. I don't care about things, but I do care about people and the trauma that we saw in the eyes of the people who work there. Young people, idealistic people like you, just shocked by the force of the violence and the threats that were going on that day. It was a horrible day because it was about not 9/11, an enemy from without, but an enemy from within.
But were you surprised by the Republican reaction afterwards, that they still didn't certify the election, they still didn't uphold democratic norms in the way they would have done in previous cycles?
No, I'm never surprised. But I was disappointed. I was certainly disappointed, and you would have thought it would have been bad enough for them to reject the Electoral College. Okay, that would have been bad enough if nothing else had happened. But in light of what had happened and what they saw and how threatened some of them felt, some of the people were pushing furniture up against the door, were later on TV saying, I don't know why everybody's making a fuss. It was just like a regular tourist day at the Capitol. So anyway, without going too far down that path, it was a horrible day. It was a horrible day. And a year ago, but a few months before January 6th, the director of the FBI testified in Congress, like 1 year from now, another week or so from now, a year ago. And he testified that the United States was in more serious threat of violence from the domestic terrorism than from global terrorism. White supremacists, anti-Semites, Islamophobic, all anti-gay, anti-women, anti-immigrant, and they found the former president did not invent them. Many of them were there, but he galvanized them, and the internet enabled them to find each other, 2 million in QAnon and the rest, and this I don't even want to say some of the things they say, because it's so appalling, and won't give it any more currency. And so that is a force that we have to deal with, and we have to deal with it this Saturday as well.
I suppose the reason that I wanted to kind of ask you about this is, it seems to me like among the Republican Party there was a lot of support, tacitly or secretly, for some of the stuff that went on that you had to deal with, that we've spoken about. And my question is, we have sort of a year left until the midterm elections. Do you think that there's a lot that could be done to try and forestall some of the other kind of anti-democratic behaviour we've seen with gerrymandering, or is there an opportunity perhaps to think about adding states, or passing sudden laws that might help that, or even abolish the filibuster, for example, to try and preserve American democracy in the coming year?
Did you get that? We have 3 bills. We have 2 bills. Thank you, Keir. You have a clear understanding of a very astute question, very to the point. We have 2 bills. One is H.R. 1, House Resolution 1, H.R. 4, House Resolution 4. They are now in the Senate, so they take on a S1, S this or that. And what they do, just so you know, because this was prescient of John Lewis, our dear John Lewis, before he left us, about 3 years ago, he wrote H.R. 1, the first 300 pages of H.R. 1. And those first 300 pages address what he saw as voter suppression in the country. And he certainly saw it in the South, but it was spreading throughout the country. So those first 300 pages go a long way to overturning these bills that are being passed in the rest of the country. They've gone beyond that now. They've gone into nullification, as I mentioned before, where not only are they not, are they suppressing the vote so that people can't vote, they are also saying, well, we're not sure who won. In Georgia, for example, in one of the counties that is Fulton County, which has Atlanta, it's the biggest African-American vote in Georgia, I believe. Well, one of. They're saying, well, we're not concerned so much about who wins the election. We'll appoint 3 people to make that decision. Nullification. Martin Luther King talked about it in the March on Washington, and so much other beauty in the speech that it was not one of the highlights, but he even recognized it way back when. So that's one. And in that, John Lewis, first 300 pages he wrote, the next pages go to gerrymandering, to end gerrymandering, so that people will select their elected officials, not elected officials choosing their voters. And then the next is about reducing the role of big, dark money in politics, which is one of the big suffocations of the vote, because it suffocates the airways with misrepresentations. So that's what we're striving to do. It's in the Senate. I think we have agreement on what suggestions they have. It remains to be seen if we can do it with 51 votes. Then we have H.R. 4, which is called the John Lewis bill, named for him, but he wrote the other one. But this one is named for him after he passed, and that's about the Voting Rights Act, which you would think that they would, of course, want to pass, but not so. The first bill is about putting out a fire. The second bill is making sure those fires don't start again by having standards for elections. So it's all there. It's just a question of if the Senate will pass it. And I'll tell you this, if we could reduce the role of that big, dark, special interest money, we could pass gun violence protection, because it's the dark gun money that is a factor in all this. If we could get rid of that big, dark money, we could have an easier time passing climate change legislation, because the fossil fuel industry's influence in the electoral system would be reduced. The list goes on and on about how it is a threshold to better legislation if you get rid of the big, dark, special interest, unreported money. Now, they can still give it, because this court gave them that permission, but they have to report it, and if they have to report it, it's a different thing. Is that more on the subject than you ever wanted to know in your life? In any event, beat goes on. We'll be fighting for that, because it really, if you take away the right of people to vote and don't respect the sanctity of the vote, you are undermining a democracy. If you take away, if you say we're going to decide who won it after the fact, you are undermining the democracy. So these issues are not just about an election. That would, Democrats and Republicans, that is almost trivial in this. This is about our democracy. The sanctity of the vote. If they take that away, we become forgive me, I don't mean this in any way, a monarchy, but not a informed monarchy with a parliament and a right. We just become a monarchy. With all respect in the world for a monarchy with a parliament. So it is nothing less at stake. What our founders had the vision, the time found them to establish a democracy, an unknown form of government, and modern, what was considered modern times then, and now to be unraveled. So we think this is the fight to honor the vision of our founders, the sacrifice of our men and women in uniform who have fought for freedom for us and others, and the aspirations of our children to live in America, a democracy.
I was going to ask all sorts of wonky follow-ups to that, but I think you're right, possibly too much. My question then is on one other kind of thing relating to values and this kind of area of politics. Looking back, obviously, I think a lot of people here will know you as the person who impeached Donald Trump twice. And I wondered, in retrospect, what do you think that did achieve or didn't achieve? How do you feel about that episode of politics in hindsight?
In terms of the impeachment of what's his name? We had no choice. This president acted in a way that was in violation of the Constitution, undermined our national security, and jeopardized the integrity of our elections. That was just the first time. So we had no choice. He crossed the bridge that made it just, we had to go down that path. And in history, well, we were very proud of the presentation. We are not proud of the cowardice of the United States Senate not to do what they knew was the right thing to do, but were just not doing in terms of the Republicans in the Senate. The second time, that was, we had absolutely no intent. We were getting ready for a new president that day on January 6th until, what's his name, incited an insurrection of our democracy. People were hiding under desks, behind, just in dark rooms and all the rest, texting each other about what the impeachment words would be. They even knew at that time that he had to be impeached for that. And both times it was bipartisan in terms of the conviction, but not enough to do. But history, not even history, near-term review will show magnificent presentations on the part of our presenters, what we call our impeachment managers, our managers, as they put forth the case for the impeachment of the president. Impeachment in itself is a penalty. Conviction does not exonerate you. If you are convicted or not, you're not exonerated. You're just not convicted. But you're always impeached. Twice.
But it didn't dampen his enthusiasm, did it, when he was impeached the first time?
I don't ever talk about him.
Okay.
I mean, I reference him from time to time as what's his name. But I don't think that we have a situation that is on the level there. And if he wants to run again, he'll be the first president who was impeached twice and defeated twice.
I think the other thing on a lot of people's lips at the moment will be Afghanistan and the relationship between the UK and the US at the moment. Obviously, for a lot of Brits, the special relationship seems like the most important thing in the world. But many here, I think, including the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, were concerned by how little say that Britain seemed to have during the Afghanistan withdrawal. And I wondered whether that was a sign, in your view, that Britain needs to learn to stand on its own 2 feet.
No, not at all. Let me just say, first of all, about the special relationship, since you Is that a message to say we want to hear from the audience now? The special relationship is indeed that, and I think stronger than ever, as strong as it needs to be. It is something that we all respect, see the value of, and others want to be a part of. But it's a special relationship, so we have to say, no, this is special. It's not special, and then it will grow. It's special in that regard between the U.S. and the UK. Shared values, shared concerns of security. Well, everything is first and foremost security. If you don't have security, the rest of it you can't deliver on. So it is a very special relationship, and I would hope if there's one thing that you would take away from here today, it would be the soundness of that special relationship from our perspective in our country. I look forward to welcoming the Prime Minister to the Congress, to a meeting of our leadership, bipartisan. I think it's Wednesday. Is it Wednesday of next week? He comes back to the U.S. He'll meet with the President, the Senate, and the rest. And it will give us another opportunity to remove all doubt. And we don't need to remove it. It is a special relationship. Ask anybody else who wants to have that relationship. They will tell you that it's a special one. The Afghanistan is, I really appreciated the words that the Prime Minister said in the House of Commons the other day when he talked about what did happen over those 20 years in terms of protecting us from a terrorist attack, and also what it did for women in the country. That is a big issue for many of us in the United States. In fact, some of the support for our military involvement in Afghanistan sprang from the support for giving women much more opportunity. I was there, what would you say, Wendy, about, I'll ask my husband, Paul, who's here with me, at least 9 times to Afghanistan. Every term we went. We usually had women's delegations. We would go visit the women in the hinterlands, not just in Kabul, which was beautiful to see the professional women and doctors, lawyers, university heads, scientists, women succeeding in every way, and also the younger women coming up in their role in how Afghanistan would go forward, and how we could be helpful. But we went out to the hinterlands and saw the poorest of the poor women and what it meant for them and their daughters. And to see the girls in school was something so remarkable, to see the little girls in school. Now that was 20 years. Some of them who would be college age now knew no other life. It was a major accomplishment. So it was time for us to leave. In fact, I think we should have left sooner. I do. But it was time for us to leave. The retrograde, which means the departure of the troops, went smoothly. The overwhelming desire for evacuees was just that, overwhelming. It wasn't neat, but we're dealing with it now. I really can't speak to the classified communication between the U.S. and UK in terms of timing and the rest of that, but it was not in any way something that anybody should infer anything from it of anything less than respect for the people who served from the UK in Afghanistan, the loss of life that you all suffered as well, and just an overwhelming. I'll just tell you this. Don't tell anybody I told you this. Okay, so this part is, we had the President Ghani of Afghanistan to visit us, would you say a month before? Late July, okay. He came, and we told him that we had, one of our members, Congressman Crow, had legislation to help those who helped us in Afghanistan. You remember the former president had a Muslim ban, you know what, I mean, without even going into that, but the inference to be drawn from that and what it meant to people in Afghanistan or Iraq, that it helped Americans. So he said, I have this bill, it's going to help thousands of people with visas to leave Afghanistan. president said, no, don't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that. This is a small meeting, we're just talking about, a dozen or so people around the table. You can't do that because that would be a vote of no confidence. But people would see that as, they're leaving, these people who help the Americans are leaving. You can't do that. So I went up and saw him after, I said, we promised. Took Jared, we promised, and we're going to help the people who helped us. The first person out of town was the president. He was telling us that these soldiers and interpreters who had helped us, if they left, it would be a vote of no confidence in their government. And then the president of the country, was he the first person out or second person out of town? So whatever it was not reliable in terms of fighting the fight to give more time for the evacuees to leave. It was sad, but 120,000 evacuees, U.S., U.K., other allies, getting them out, that was historic in its proportion. Unfortunately, it had and there are others that we're going to try to get out, but it is not to be undermined, in my view, in any way.
Wonderful. Well, there's an awful lot there that I would like to ask you about, but I'm aware we have not a huge amount of time to go to audience questions. For the first thing here, I know Varsity are somewhere in the room.
You?
Over there, yes. We will go over there for the first audience question.
Oh, a woman. Oh, no, it isn't a woman. It's a man if I'm here.
In light of the recent defence deal, can everyone hear me okay? Yeah? No? In light of the recent defence deal between the US, the UK and Australia, and the Times report on Tuesday about Huawei's connections with the University of Cambridge department, what do you believe to be the role of universities in navigating relations with China?
Thank you for your question. That was quite historic, the announcement between the UK, Australia, and the United States in terms of security in that region, and I thought it was strong and appropriate. You weren't even born when I was on China's case, most of you here, practically none of you. And since Tiananmen Square, whether it was the human rights issues, of course, but also the trade violations, the proliferation of weapons, technology for weapons of mass destruction, delivery systems that they were shipping out, and doing this with impunity. They became they abused our friendships in terms of trade by mounting big trade deficits with the EU, with the United States first, EU and the rest. Nonetheless, they're a force, they're big. In our country, when you're a little child, they say if you dig a hole in the sand, but you're at the beach, you'll reach China. So we've always felt connected to China. But with their military aggression in the South China Sea, with their continuation of genocide with the Uyghurs in Xinjiang province there, with their violation of the cultural, linguistic, religious priority of Tibet, with their suppression of democracy in Hong Kong and other parts of China as well. They're just getting worse in terms of suppression and freedom of speech. So that militarily, so human rights, security, economically. Having said all of that, and again, I go back and forth to China, I've been there a number of times. Sometimes I'm considered the most unpopular person in China, or sometimes the most unpopular American in China, which I wear with a badge of honor because, and again, I have my relationships there because we've been fighting a long time. But we have to work together on climate. Climate is an overriding issue. And China is a leading emitter in the world, US too, developed world too, but we must work together. So we have to have a level of communication on whether it's COVID, whether it's terrorism, or whether it's climate. We still have to have some communication and dialogue with China on that. But the situation in China is tightening. It's getting worse and worse in terms of but I'm not saying democratic reform, I'm just saying freedom of speech or pluralism, or just the ability of people to speak out. They're not trying to change the government, they're just trying to express themselves. And that, it's a major problem. So, you mentioned Huawei. That is a big threat. I went and spoke at the Munich last year, right before COVID. We had the Munich conference, the Munich Security Conference, and I spoke there specifically about the danger of China having control of data that these connections would bring about. So I'm pleased to see the UK withdrawing from that, and it is a problem. We do have to develop our own 5G and be advanced in so much technology, so that we're not saying, well, they're the best and the cheapest, and so we all have to be enslaved by the Chinese in terms of their control of the data. This is a democratic issue beyond a technology and an economic issue. So it is. So I was pleased with the announcement that they made. Let me just say about our president, President Biden. President Biden we're so fortunate that he did not win for president before when he ran, because we needed him now. He's perfect for now. He knows his foreign policy. He was chair of the Foreign Policy Committee. He's extends the hands of friendship to friend and foe alike in order to have communication. He understands the value of that. He knows and is known by most leaders and coming up leaders in the world. And he is, again, as president, he doesn't come into this learning on the job. And I believe that was a very, very important initiative with the UK and Australia. And I commend all three of the leaders for bringing that about, because you don't want to have, some of it has to be sooner rather than later. You don't want to be too late in how you recognize an economic, security, and values threat to the rest of the world, and then connect it through technology, because they can go out there cheaper, attract more people, and then you're hooked. You're hooked. So I appreciate what they did.
Good.
But I just want to also add by saying, when we come to COP26, it's really important that we have regard for China, its role, and how important it is to saving the planet.
Could we get to maybe the one on the end here? Don't know if there's a microphone anywhere in this.
I can just go now. First of all, thank you so much for speaking with us today. I do admit I'm a bit starstruck, so I'm sorry if I messed my question up a bit. But as a long-time supporter of the Equal Rights Amendment, I was wondering what you believe the next step should be in the fight to ratify it. If you think the joint resolution introduced in the Senate has a chance of being passed, or if you think that Ruth Bader Ginsburg was right in saying that we should start over.
No, as you wish. If you want to start over. Okay, the question was, what do I think of the chances of the Equal Rights Amendment passing in the Senate? We passed it in the House. And do I think that there was a little, how can I say, it's a little fuzzy in terms of where some people were on this. The question was, do we just need to add one more state? And we have that. That's Virginia. So that's the path we want to go. There are others who have said we have to start all over again. Well, we have never had an Equal Rights Amendment if we had to start all over again in light of what's happening in many of these states. And the very revered, whom I love, had her under the dome of the Capitol for her goodbye of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, not necessarily agreeing that we had to start all over again, that she had to say. So again, if we had just 51 votes in the Senate, we could pass it. If it's 60 votes, unless people weigh in. President Lincoln said, public sentiment is everything. With it, you can accomplish almost anything. Without it, practically nothing. But for public sentiment to weigh in, people have to know. So we want people to know what is at stake with the Equal Rights Amendment, and that they could weigh in with their senator. Because nothing is more eloquent to a member of Congress than the voice of his or her own constituents. That's probably true in Parliament as well, but I cannot speak from that experience. But I know it's true in the US. So we want people to weigh in, and it just makes all the sense in the world that women are the unprotected in there. Let me just say, we have another bill, it's called Equality. And what we did with the Equality Act is to open up the Civil Rights Bill. Now, mind you, we're all very protective of the Civil Rights Act for what it means to our country, especially the Congressional Black Caucus, very possessive of it. But they supported, and John Lewis took the lead on this, in opening the Civil Rights Act to include the LGBTQ community in terms of equality, not just in the workplace, but in the workplace and financial institutions, every category, housing, every category that you can name. This is quite remarkable. We passed it in the House. It's awaiting its consideration in the Senate. So all of these things about expanding freedom or recognizing rights are what our Constitution was about. It didn't do the job right from the start, but it allowed it to be amended so that it could. And we'll be fighting for that. Right now, we have a little fight with an interpretation of the Constitution relating to a woman's right to choose, and that will be a major fight as well.
Could we go perhaps to the woman right at the back, sort of over there near the microphone?
Notice I take no part in selecting who's asking the question. That's a level of politics that I can never achieve.
For letting me ask a question, Keir. I think a lot of it's been raised about things being stalled at the Senate or mentions of the Supreme Court on things like Roe versus Wade. So do you think it's time we got a bit more radical with how we're going to tackle big issues like abortion, racism, climate change, along the lines of more progressives in the House like AOC and the Squad? And do you think we should start looking at things like reforming the Supreme Court, filibuster reform? Obviously what these guys are talking about, the new guys into the House, they're talking about these more radical things and unseating maybe Democrats that have been around longer who are maybe not as radical. How do you kind of balance those two things where it seems that we need a more radical approach, and maybe this is why this younger generation are starting to unseat older Democrats? As the leader of the party, where do you see it going, and are you supportive of these radical changes?
Now, I heard a number of questions. I do want to make sure I heard them clearly. One was, is it time to reform the Supreme Court? Was that one? Well, reform meaning enlarge, I assume, or other way. And then another was about the climate crisis. Was that?
Yeah, how can we be more radical? It's always going to get blocked in the Senate with filibusters.
Oh, the Senate, yeah. Well, thank you for that. Okay, well, the first thing on the court, we have not increased the number of judges on the Supreme Court since Lincoln's day. It became 9. So there is a discussion that could be had about should we expand that. The only thing is when you talk about it, everybody says you're being political, you're only doing it because you don't like the justices who are there. The second part of that is true, but the first part of it, it's not about politics, it's about what we should be doing. Now, there are things that the Supreme Court should be reformed. The Supreme Court, all of us who run for office, and my husband can attest to that, you have to disclose all of your assets. You have to disclose every sale of stock that you make or anything. Supreme Court, no, Mount Olympus. They don't have to do, we don't have to know anything about them. And they make decisions that affect our lives in many ways, whether it's climate. They'll make important environmental decisions. They make decisions in relation to a woman's right to choose. They make decisions in relating to voting. rights, you name any subject, we're at the mercy of this court that is on Mount Olympus, accountable to no one for life. So there's some things that are worthy of conversation, and to that end, President Biden established a commission to study that. It's not something that you just walk in and say, I heard at a rally we should just do the court, so let's just do the court. No, let's study what the ramifications are and how you do it in a way that is not interpreted as a political decision, but a decision of justice. These three last justices who went to the court did not have to reach the 60-vote threshold because the Republicans changed the rules to say, to confirm the Supreme Court justices, you just need a simple majority. We wish they'd do that for a woman's right to choose. We wish they'd do that for climate. We wish they'd do it for LGBTQ. We wish they'd do it for gun violence protection. The list goes on. Voting rights and the rest. But it hasn't. It's just for the court. Three people to have a job for life, who are relatively young, court-wise, to make decisions that affect all of us while we can't get a bill passed that will enable people not to stand in line for 10 hours to vote when they have to leave their workplace to do so, and their children. So there's just an injustice in it all. But I don't think you'll see any move to increase the court until the President's Commission makes its report. And again, it has to be handled with care because, frankly, we have more respect for the court and the institution it is as a separation of government than the person who appointed those three justices with the way he did a year or two ago. And the climate is, with the climate issue right now, just to put this in context, right now we're in a place where the Senate has passed a bill on infrastructure, and everybody's making a big fuss. Oh, they passed an infrastructure, but we have to do it, roads and bridges and blah, 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 and we do. But it makes not much of a nod to the climate crisis in it. It could have been written maybe 50 years ago or 60 or 70, and what we want to do is, in our reconciliation bill, it's more on the subject you ever want to know in your life, just reject it then, or forget about it after I'm finished, or before. And then we're doing the reconciliation bill, and so we can't really amend their bill because it was bipartisan, and it's a good thing. And it's a triumph for the president that he got a bipartisan bill. But we have to have much more on climate in the reconciliation bill, or else, in my view, we would be in dereliction of duty to not be thinking of how you build back better. Not build back the way, but build back better. And that build back better is with concern for the planet in terms of how we build things, and we have all the expertise and the science to take us in a very positive direction. And also how you build back better by involving more people. For me, it's build back better with women. We do things in this legislation that are so remarkable for women and dads, moms and dads, or people who are caregivers at home. Child care, child tax credit, family and medical leave, universal pre-K. These don't sound very revolutionary to you because you all have them. Most of our developed countries have all this, but we don't in the U.S. Women took a big bite of the wormy apple called COVID. Just over 4 million women lost their jobs because their children weren't in school. They couldn't afford child care. They had an elder parent or a disabled relative or something they had to care for. This legislation changes that. And we believe that if you're going, and I've said this to some of you earlier, in anything that we do, whether it's politics or government or our economy, whatever it is, we're better off with more women in the leadership and the participation. So when we build back better, we'll have workforce development. So it's not just women, but it's people of color, many more underrepresented in those professions and trades than before. And on top of that, with justice, we have a quota that we hope we can honor, a 40% as we build our infrastructure that most of those jobs would go to previously underrepresented communities, especially to, just for example, to take down highways that have split communities and make them a community again. So again, as I said in my opening remarks, so much of what we do has to be about justice. And with these bills, it's about economic and environmental justice. So we're very excited about it. So that's what I'm on the phone living with all night in the time difference here. But we met our goal. Our goal was to meet by September 15th to have our bills written, and they are. And now we just have to reconcile with the Senate because they have different rules, and we hope to be on schedule for it all. But you cannot look backward and just build. You have to build for the future, build better, and that doesn't just mean in an environmentally sound way, but in an environmentally just way, and in a way that is Build Back Better with women, because we believe that when women succeed, America succeeds. And that is an applause line. Well, in America it is.
I reckon we started late, so we will run slightly late. We've probably got time for 2 more questions, something like that.
That was an admonition to me to keep it short.
Thought that was going to go undetected. Could we go perhaps to the lady in red, just on the front row here? Just waiting for a microphone there.
Madam Speaker.
Hello.
I was delighted.
Hi.
Take the microphone, there you go.
Bipartisan relationships in American politics are widely vaunted and very much admired. What I think has been depressing from an external perspective is that it seems that the House and Senate divide on partisan lines.
Mm-hmm.
You have called for the Republicans to become true Republicans.
Right.
I'm wondering how these two different attitudes and these actions can be reconciled.
Well, I appreciate your question. Why you say that about what I say about the Republicans is, I'd say to my Republican friends, and I do have some, take back your party. You're the grand old party of America. You've done wonderful things for our country. You've now been hijacked by a cult that is just not good for our country. Take back your party. Do not let it be dominated by those who want to suppress the vote because they have no positive message to win. They want to suppress the vote, and that's how they would win. Those who disrespect the rights and the beautiful diversity of America, and it is even becoming more so. They completely disregard the fact that in the country, overwhelmingly in the country, people support gun violence, 80% something, support background checks for guns. Democrats, Republicans, independents, gun owners, hunters, but not the members of Congress. Same thing with climate, same thing with women's right to choose. It's not as high as that, but it's high. So take back your party so it's more a reflection of Republicans in the country than allegiance to the former president. And one of the ways we can help improve that situation is by passing H.R. 1, which would have redistricting in a way that is, again, agnostic, just along the lines of the Voting Rights Act. It may not benefit Democrats, but it may benefit the country because it would make Republican districts more open to people other than the ones that are in Congress now.
Okay, we'll go person right on the end. Yes.
Thank you. I'll keep my question short. Who was the Commander-in-Chief of the United States military between January 7th and the inauguration of President Biden? And I'm talking, of course, about the CNN reports that people, including yourself, tried to cut President Trump out of the chain of command when he went into decline post-January 6th.
Well, it wasn't a question of cutting him out of the chain of command. It was a question of what the checks and balances were on that chain of command. There were several issues at hand there. We had just had an insurrection, a violent attack on the Congress of the United States and the U.S. Capitol by the sitting president of the United States. We had also had concerns about what he might do at the inauguration in terms of air cover, because we had all the protection in the world for our inauguration for the peaceful transfer of power, which is the emblem of a democracy. And so we had very serious concerns, some of it because of concern we had in the White House. There didn't seem to be enough checks and balances on the finger on the nuclear button. So this was a very major concern for us. So it wasn't a question of his not having the power, it was a question of who's watching the store. And we were, as a country, in great danger because of the disregard for the separation of checks and balances, which is fundamental to a democracy. You have to have checks and balances, otherwise you just have a king. And that's not what our system was about or is about. So, and not a very democratic form of government. So, you're seeing some things. I can't attest to, confirm or deny some of what is being said because it all came out since I've been here. But it is true that there was very grievous concern, not just among House Democrats or Senate Democrats, but among those responsible for our national security, that a finger on the button, war with the country, an invasion, anything to take attention away from the fact that we were having a peaceful transfer of that. It's a very sad thing. That's why I say to the Republicans, take back your party. This isn't who you are. And by the way, unprecedented. We never had a president behave like this. Unprecedented. Speaking of presidents, may I just close by saying this? Because you had Teddy Roosevelt, over 100 years ago, come speak here. And getting back to climate again, because that is, it's everything. It's jobs, it's health, it's security, it's values, and the rest, as I said earlier. And as you well know better than I, because it's your future. But when we had a new president over 200 years ago, Thomas Jefferson, when he was president, he instituted the first, what he called the Gallatin Initiative. Gallatin was Secretary of Treasury, and he tasked Secretary Gallatin to come up with a plan to build the infrastructure of America. The Cumberland Road, the Erie Canal, into the Louisiana Purchase, which he was in, the Lewis and Clark Expedition, all these things important to our country, but to build into America. 100 years later, Teddy Roosevelt, you wonder why I went back, but 100 years later, Theodore Roosevelt, in honor of the 100th anniversary of that initiative, his infrastructure initiative was establishing the National Park Service to preserve the green patrimony of America. It was quite remarkable that he did that as president. 100 years later, we tried to get some others to do that. President Bush was wonderful, and we worked with him on many issues. He helped us with a great energy bill to reduce emissions and the rest, but there was no interest in doing something on that grand scale. But now we have that initiative. It's been put forth by our House Select Committee on Climate. We'll bring those ideas when we come to COP26. We're incorporating them into the bill that we're writing now, but unfortunately we can only get Democratic votes for it because of the denial on climate on the other, the climate crisis on the other side of the aisle. But again, you have to think big. You have to have a big vision. And so through thinking in terms of running for office or helping somebody else run or creating an initiative, think big. Have your vision. Know your subject. Know what it is. You don't have to know everything about it. Nobody does. but just show your knowledge so that people respect your judgment on it. Have a plan, vision and a plan based on knowledge and judgment. And you will be a leader. You will be considered a leader because people will be drawn to a vision and a plan to get it done based on knowledge and judgment that they can bring to it, listening to others. So again, I hope that all of you will take seriously your responsibilities to the civic life of whatever country you're from, or if it's all here. That's good. I think the young women to be confident about going forward, because we need to have the diversity at the table, beyond women, minorities, etc. And it is your future. You have to take responsibility for it. Sometimes it's hard. You get criticized. I'm the target of all, but it's worth it. And I'll just close with this prayer. There was a minister, Presbyterian bishop in Africa, and he posted his prayer on the hospital wall in Africa. And it said, "When one day I happily go to meet my Maker, Creator will say to me, 'Show me your wounds.' And if I have no wounds, Lord, I have no wounds," he'll say, "was nothing worth fighting for." This is all worth fighting for. It's all worth fighting for justice, for planet, for the future, for everything. And it's exciting. Have fun with it, but understand that nothing is more wholesome than your taking responsibility for your future. And that's why I was so excited to be here to hear some of your concerns. Of course, Keir compiled some from before, so I appreciate that. Thank you, James. Thank you all. I'm very honored to receive this honorary. I'll display it with pride in the Speaker's office. When you visit, you'll see it there. And again, I wish you all the best for your future, a future that is more secure, safer, healthier because of your involvement. Thank you all so much.